Hi Natalie.
Hi.
Would you like to tell us very briefly, introduce us to the Green Party?
Okay, well, my name's Natalie Bennett and I'm the leader of the Green Party of England and Wales. And if you're going to put it in a sentence or so of what we stand for, we believe that everyone in Britain and ultimately the world needs to have the access to resources for a decent quality of life, while we're all living in with the limits of the one planet, which is of course the only planet we've got.
Why do you think people fail to recognize the fundamental importance of sustainability and its connection to politics and economy?
Well, I think what's increasingly being recognised is that our whole current setup, politics, economics, society, is profoundly unsustainable. And I think people realise that not necessarily in a kind of analytical, I've done an equation kind of way, but people can feel it in their gut. People are really feeling like, I don't feel very secure about my own future, my children's future, my grandchildren's future. And that reflects the fact that our economy increasingly isn't building jobs, creating jobs that people can build a life on. Lots of people are increasingly aware of climate change issues, of environmental issues. They're noticing, the loss of butterflies, bees, birds just aren't the same numbers around as they used to be. People see these things on all kind of different levels from all kind of different experiences. And people are also hearing about the state of our financial sector and the fact that we recently had the Bank of International Settlements saying we're closer to a financial crash now than we were in 2007. And people hear all of those things and recognise that our whole system simply isn't. We're not going to continue as things are not going to continue as they are because they simply can't. The status quo isn't an option. And yet what we've got in terms of British politics, certainly, and sadly a lot of politics around the world, is a kind of business as usual politics. We have leaders who aren't recognising the need to change, even while their voters do.
What will be your message for global collaboration?
Right. Well, what I would say in terms of the world working together is that we have to. There simply is no alternative. We are on one small planet. We used to think of it as the world as an enormous place, but we're now all interconnected. You think about things like the plastic soup in the middle of some of the most remote oceans in the world. You think about species of wild animal all around the world in some of our remote places being affected by climate change. We are in one world. And that means a whole range of things. We need a different kind of economy. We need an economy that works within the limits of this planet, because it is worth focusing on the fact that an economy is only the subset of the ecosystem. It doesn't operate outside that. And it is really worth saying and focusing on again and again that we need a peaceful world. That's one of the prerequisites to get to a point where the world is able to live within its limits. There's lots of things around the state of the world at the moment. Gaza, Syria, amidst lots of African states we're seeing conflict associated with drought. In Ukraine, there's lots of those situations. But we also have to say, we have to believe and we have to work towards a peaceful world, because that's one of the ways in which we can ensure everyone in the globe has the chance of a decent life within those environmental limits.
You said in one of your late interviews that in Parliament we need more diversity of backgrounds in terms of people. Why do you think this is important?
Well, I think if you look at the state of the British Parliament today, we're drawing in parliamentarians from a scarily and increasingly narrow group of people. People who come from political families, people who've been through a very narrow range of educational backgrounds. And that really means that people find it difficult to relate to Parliament. And even more importantly, perhaps, Parliament finds it really difficult to relate to and understand the reality of people's lives. I really don't think that our Tory Lib Dem government, many people within that, understand what it's like for a job seeker who's just been sanctioned. And the sheer desperation of having no money, not knowing where to go, what to do, who to turn to, maybe thinking, I've got to go and rely on my family again. Can I do that? We don't have people who, it's not within their experience, their knowledge, their background, or it seems their ability to empathise. And that's a real problem. And, as an old feminist, feminism was my first politics, getting women represented in Parliament, but getting, beyond gender, getting a much broader range of people from different class backgrounds, different occupational backgrounds. I'd love to see a couple of dinner ladies in Parliament.
Thank you. Are there any particular countries or governments in the EU or over the world that have your values and policies and are implementing them right now?
Right. Well, I think, in terms of the models that we can look to around the world, obviously the Scandinavian countries, they're not perfect, but in terms of whole issues in terms of social equality, the gap between rich and poor, kind of things like gender equality, and they're not always perfectly right. But if we want to talk about energy policy, and again, it's not perfectly right, but you look at how Germany has surged ahead with renewable energy, while Britain has been just left far, far behind. At one point a year or so back, out of 26 European countries, we could boast that we were ahead of Malta and Luxembourg when it comes to the percentage of energy generated by renewables, which isn't really something to boast about. So, there's lots of, for different areas, there's lots of different countries around the world that have really good models. But you also have to recognise that what you really need to do is home grow these things. You can't necessarily just, grab copy wholesale something from another country, different culture, different experiences. So, you can look to those and say, how can we get to a similar endpoint within our own framework and structures?
Today, in the era of globalization, our systems are basically based on competition and duality, separation. So we need for the planet to collaborate together to bring unity. How would that be possible if you're calling for localization?
Well, I think in the Green Party we believe in subsidiarity, to put it in European terms, on people as close to possible, the people who are being affected by a decision, those people making it. That's the kind of foundation of democracy. But what we need to do is make decisions at the right level. So, for example, to think of one of the obvious ones, we have to, and we have already roughly know what the figures are, we have to decide a global carbon budget, and everyone has to stick within that. Now, that's a decision that has to be put together at a global level. But then the decisions of how you do that, precisely how you deliver it, has to come down through a whole series of levels, ultimately to local communities. And sort of looking at the other end of that, we think about, we very much support community-owned renewable energy. So you can take a village somewhere in a nice area that decides, we want to generate a lot of our own energy for the village. We're going to invest in, might be some places, solar panels might be right, wind turbines might be right, a hydro scheme on the river, whatever suits each individual place. So you've got decisions being made locally within the global framework.
Closer to the people?
Yeah, I think we've got to do a lot of things in terms of bringing politics closer to the people. In terms of what we really need to do is, stop talking like policy wonks, or like we've learnt 3 sentences and you're just going to keep reciting them endlessly, because that's the message we've been told to get across today. Politicians need to talk like normal people, show that they understand people's concerns, listen, which is a very important thing that you don't often see much sign of. And we do need a different kind of politics, a democratic politics, and a politics that recognises the need for change and acknowledges the fact that we have been running the system for rich individuals and multinational companies, and that really has to change.
I've noticed that loads of students, young people, and also non-voters feel very alienated from politics in general. It's very unreachable, and it seems unchangeable. Why do you think this is happening? And
I think it's very understandable why many people have turned their back on politics, and many students and young people don't even get involved in politics to the point of voting, because it looks so alienating and so different, and it so doesn't address their concerns. But what I would say to all of them is, in Britain we had Russell Brand came along and said, to paraphrase, don't vote, it only encourages them. But that's no answer, because democracy is the only solution, I believe. And what we need is a democracy where people are far more engaged, far more making choices, getting involved in the arguments, doing democracy themselves. And that might be, at a very, very simple level, the old collectivism, sign a few petitions, click a few things online, share a few things on your Facebook page, right up through. There's a whole range of things that people can do, and they're all politics. And perhaps we don't always think about those things as being politics, but they are.
Yeah, I see. So the Green Party is a solution, let's say. Right?
Well, I would very much say so. The Green Party is always extremely profoundly democratic. All of our policies are actually made by our members at conference And it always amazes people to know that 4 members of the Green Party can step forward and say, we want to promote this policy, and they put it to conference, and conference decides whether it should be our policy or not. And also in terms of selecting our candidates, I have a lot of problem with journalists who go, but you must pre-screen them, or throw some people out of the mix before you give it to the voters to decide. It's like, no. You put your name forward, you get the number of signatures required from local party members, you stand. There is no filtering. There's a real chance for everyone to get involved in democracy. And democracy actually works out very well, we find.